snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books.
Hi guys! So I am here today to review 3 books for you. They are Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan, Geek, Feminist Revolution by Cameron Hurley, and Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. Let's start off with Sleeping Giants because that's the one I have on top. Sleeping Giants I read very recently, and I read it with Eleanor and Lauren, whose channels I will link down below. This came out in April, I believe, so it's a fairly recent release, although it was a few months ago now. I had this in my anticipated reads of the year because I was so excited about it. It sounded so cool, and I'm very glad to say that it did interest me the whole way through. It was definitely a thought-provoking book. I think probably I had the hardest time deciding what rating to give it at the end of the day out of the 3 I'm talking about, because I really liked so much of it, but then I definitely had problems with it as well. The basic story of this is that we follow a young girl called Rose who is out cycling one day and she falls down a giant hole, and when she does, she lands in the palm of a massive, gigantic metal hand, and no one knows where this has come from. It's never been there before, people have never noticed it, so they know that it's something unusual. It gets taken into this research centre. We then skip forward in time and we follow our same main character as she has grown up. She is called Rose, and she is part of the investigation to find out more about this hand and what it might be. They start to believe it could be alien, it could be another civilization, they're not really sure, but one thing they do know is that there must be other pieces than just a hand. They think that there might even be a whole body out there, so they start to launch this big investigation into whether or not there are other pieces, where they might be found, and the whole globe is scaled for pieces. So that's basically the overall idea. The interesting thing about this book, and something that was both good and bad, is that it's told mostly in interview format. So we have a nameless main character, faceless, nameless narrator who is basically an interviewer for all of our other main characters. We never know his name, we never really learn his motives, we don't really know where he comes from or what his intentions are, but we know that he seems to have more answers than he's letting on to our main characters. He sits down with them in recorded sessions and he will ask prying questions about things that have been going on with research. He will basically try anything to find out more and more. So we kind of get the story in bits and pieces from various different interviews and various different sessions where he sat down and interviewed other people. We also later on get a sort of diary entry format coming into it. I didn't think this worked as well. It was okay, but it wasn't my favourite method of kind of giving us the information. As I said, I do think that the interview format is really interesting. One thing it does is make the book so easy to read. It's such a quick read, so easy to get through, but it also kind of leaves you feeling a little bit disconnected from the characters. We have this main character who's interviewing people who is kind of like a nameless, faceless villain. He seems as though he's almost like a Bond character. He seems as though he's a little bit distant and aloof from everyone else. I initially thought he was an AI because of how cold he was in some situations and how emotionless he seemed in some situations, so that gives you an idea of just how cold he is. So we don't know much about him, and then we also don't get to know our other main characters that much either, because we're only seeing snippets of them. We're not really getting the description and development that we want. So it's an interesting book. Definitely an interesting book with a lot of potential. The second half made me think a lot about what might happen next in a really good way. It made me want to pick up the next book, so that's always good. I think there were some really interesting questions raised in this about like our significance in the universe and what that might be if there are alien beings creating massive giant hands that we've never found and technology we've never experienced. So I definitely like those sorts of questions that it raised. I do think it could have been more developed and more succinct. So overall, I would give this a 3.5. That's what I'm going for. I think it was close to a 4 because I did really enjoy it, but I just want a little bit more from it, and I feel like the next book in the series really has potential to build on what this book began in a great way and to sort of give us something a little bit more and something really quite unique and exciting. I hope that's what happens. I hope it doesn't just fall flat on its face and go downhill. but I am really intrigued, so I'm definitely going to try and pick up the next book when it comes out. I would love to hear your thoughts on this one if you've read it, because I've heard mixed things and I think a lot of people are giving it sort of middle of the road 2, 3, 4-star ratings. I'm obviously right bang in the middle of that with a 3.5 rating. So if you have read this, do let me know your thoughts, because it was a really interesting one to discuss, so certainly would love to do that with you guys in the comments too. Moving on to the second book I have to review, it is The Geek Feminist Revolution. This is a non-fiction book, so it's quite different to the one I just spoke about. It's by Cameron Hurley, whose books I have read before. I've read God's War and I've read The Mirror Empire by her, and I definitely like her as a fiction writer, but this is, as I say, non-fiction. Most of this is articles and blog posts that she has written on her blog that have been taken and edited to put into a book format. A lot of it is apparently not new content, so if you are an avid reader of her blog, then I don't think you're going to get a huge amount more out of this book, because it is pretty much the same sort of stuff. But if you've not read her blog, like me, I haven't, then maybe it will be incentive to start reading her blog, because some of the topics that she covers are really, really interesting. There were a few in this that I didn't love, but most of this collection, I'd say like 80% of the collection, was really solidly good, solidly strong, and I loved and agreed with so much of what she was saying that I just couldn't help but smile and be interested when I was reading this. It is quite a quick read, even though it's non-fiction, so that's always good, and it is quite an easy book to connect with. If you're anything like me and you like books and you like feminism and you like geek culture or any of that stuff, then you'll probably really enjoy this. I wouldn't say I have a favourite essay in particular, but there are a lot of good ones, and I definitely think it's something that a lot more people should read. If that sounds at all appealing to you, then check it out. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars overall, and I would certainly recommend it. And the final one that I have to talk to you about is Age of Myth. This is by Michael J. Sullivan, and it is the new one in his Legends of the First Empire series, which is set in the same world as Rieria, but like hundreds of thousands of years earlier. This is a completely new set of characters. However, we do have some sort of folklore crossover, because in the Rieria books we get a lot of talk about some of the ancient history, and that is what this time period is. So we are going to see some crossover of that, which is really cool. This follows a couple of different main characters. We have Wraith, who is a young man who kind of starts off the book by crossing into some very hostile territory away from his home with his father, and instantly when we meet him, his father is killed in front of him by what is known as a Frey, and these are kind of like elven, mystical creatures who people regard as gods in this world. They have magical powers, and so people think that they are just indestructible godlike beings, and he kills Wraith's father, and that's how the book begins, so that's not a spoiler. The next character that we follow is one of my favourites. This is Persephone, who has lived in a steadhold for all of her life. She has just been living quite happily there, grown up in this rural community where everyone knows everyone and they just kind of get on with their lives, and they're not really bothered by the Frey, who are on the other side of the river and never come over. But when her husband is viciously mauled to death by a bear, which also recently killed her son, she is left basically alone in the world. She doesn't really have any family anymore, but she does have her friends, and they are there for her and they support her. She was married to the leader of their tribe, and when he dies, she's kind of ousted on her own and left to just get on with it and find somewhere new to live when a new chieftain takes over. So she's kind of in this limbo state of not really knowing what her position is, but also kind of having a lot of past history and knowledge that the new chieftain would benefit from if he listened to her, which, let's be honest, we all know he's silly and he's not going to. So that's Persephone. And then the final character that we're following is Suri, and Suri is my favourite, and Suri reminds me so much of Ori from the Kingkiller Chronicles. So if you've read Patrick Rothfuss's books and you like Ori, I think you'll really like Suri. Suri is a young mystic. She has been raised in the woods by another older mystic, and she has all sorts of crazy talents, like being able to see things in the future, being able to listen to and talk to trees and get answers from them, and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. She's a little bit bizarre and a little bit unusual as a character, which is why I say she reminds me of Ori, but she definitely also has this like bright spark fun within her. She likes to do things because they're fun. She doesn't like to be restricted. She doesn't like to do things just because it's like a duty. She does things because they're important or because they make sense, and I really like her. She also has a fantastic way, being raised out in the forests and not really growing up with civilization, of analysing civilization and some of the things that people do within society. She looks at those things and analyses them and kind of gives a really great, unique perspective on them. She just made me laugh so many times by saying things that I'd never even thought about, but when she said them, they made perfect sense and they were just really, really funny. So I loved that about her character. We also have some other characters who do play a big part. We have Nifron, who is a renegade from the Fray. He used to be part of them, but he is now trying to escape and get away. Mawildil? I'm not sure I said that right. That was probably really bad. But we have him as well, and he is the Prince of the Fae. Arion is the Prince tutor, so she tutors the Prince of the Fray. She's very powerful, someone that a lot of people look up to and respect, but she's also someone that a lot of people envy, so her story definitely involves jealousy. I believe that this is going to be a 5-book series, so when we get to the end of book 1, the magic is not fully explained yet, but I feel like we're starting to understand things a little bit more. That's my main complaint with this, is that I don't feel like I know enough about the magic yet, but I really think it's a fascinating book series and a fascinating beginning to what could be a really epic, exciting series. We have the art within this book, which is what the Fray use. It's their name for their magic, and it's basically being able to manipulate and control all sorts of things. We don't really know what the power source is yet, or where it comes from, or what it is tied to, but it's really interesting to see when they use it. Knowing Michael J. Sullivan, it will be explained later on. We also have mysticism and nature being used in the story, and again, we don't fully understand them yet, but I'm sure it will come. I have to say that whilst I was reading this, I was just looking for a fun adventure, and that's exactly what I got. But it wasn't just a fun adventure, it was really exciting adventure. It had some great character moments. Michael J. Sullivan's one of those people who I really like the dialogue for, and he just makes me hooked into the story super quick. Even if it's a long book, I read it so quickly because of how fun it is and how exciting it is. And I mean, it's obvious to me that this is book 1 in a series. It definitely isn't going to be as strong as the later books because it is a set-up book, but it's so wonderfully done and I really enjoyed it, so I would certainly recommend picking this one up if you haven't already. I do think Michael J. Sullivan is just one of those authors who I'm just going to buy everything by because he's just fantastic. So loved this, really would recommend it, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars overall. It was just captivating and exciting and wonderful and kind of a little bit of everything I wanted and hoped for. Let me know down below if you read this one or the other 2 that I just mentioned. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of them. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.